She took everything he had, his company, his savings, and the future they once dreamed of together. 2 years later, fate brought her back, not as his girlfriend, but as a desperate job applicant. She expected revenge. Instead, she discovered something even more devastating. The man she betrayed now owned her future. What happened next changed both of their lives forever. Marsh Luke had built his life around one promise, that Riya Jannet would always be by his side. They had been together for 4 years, ever since college, and everyone who knew them called them the perfect couple. Marsh worked 2 jobs to save enough money to start his own small logistics company, a dream he had nursed since he was 18. Riya was his biggest supporter, or so he thought. When Marsh finally saved enough to invest in his startup, he trusted Riya completely. He added her name to the company's joint account for safety, he told his best friend Alex. So if something happens to me, she's taken care of. Alex had warned him, "Man, don't mix love with business," he'd said over cheap beer one night. Marsh had laughed it off. Love, he believed, was stronger than paperwork. 6 months later, everything Marsh had built collapsed overnight. Riya emptied the joint account, transferred the company's initial contracts to a shell business she had secretly registered, and disappeared, leaving nothing but a text message. "I'm sorry, Marsh. I needed a fresh start. You'll understand one day." Marsh didn't understand. Not that day, not for months. He lost his office space. He lost his only 2 employees. He lost the small apartment he had been renting because he couldn't make rent without the business income he'd promised himself would come. He moved back into his childhood home, into a room that still had his high school trophies on the shelf, silent reminders of a boy who once believed the world was fair. His mother, Mrs. Luke, tried to comfort him. She showed her true colors, Beta. Better now than after marriage. Marsh nodded, but the words didn't reach the wound for her. It wasn't just the money, it was the trust, shattered into pieces he wasn't sure he could ever put back together. For weeks, Marsh barely left his room. Alex visited every day, sometimes just to sit with him in silence, other times to drag him out for a walk. "You're not done, Marsh," Alex said one evening. "You built something out of nothing once. You can do it again, smarter this time." Something in those words cracked open a door in Marsh's mind. He began writing, not a business plan, but a list of everything he had learned from his failure. Trust blindly, lose everything, depend on one person, collapse when they leave, build without protection, and anyone can take it. He decided that if he ever built something again, it would be untouchable. No shortcuts, no blind trust. Every contract locked, every partnership legally bulletproof, every decision made with his head, not just his heart. 3 months after Riya left, Marsh took a job as a delivery coordinator at a logistics firm, the very industry he had once dreamed of leading. It was humbling. 2 years passed. Marsh Luke was no longer the broken man sleeping in his childhood bedroom. He had spent those years working brutally long hours, first as a coordinator, then as an operations manager, learning every flaw of the logistics industry from the inside. He noticed how companies lost clients over late deliveries, how poor communication between departments cost businesses thousands, and how most competitors were too slow to adapt to new technology. With the little savings he managed to rebuild, and a small loan co-signed by his mother, Marsh started his second company, Ironclad Logistics. This time, there would be no shortcuts. He hired a lawyer before he hired an employee. Every partnership came with ironclad contracts. Fitting, given the company's name. He kept full ownership. No joint accounts. No blind trust. His first office was smaller than a studio apartment. Just Marsh, a folding desk, and a laptop. Alex, who had stood by him through the darkest months, became his first real hire. Not out of charity, but because Alex had genuine talent in client relations that Marsh had recognized during their late-night conversations. "You really think this will work?" Alex asked, unpacking boxes in the tiny office. "It has to," Marsh replied, "because I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing this because I refuse to be broken again." Voiceover. The early months were brutal. Marsh took on jobs personally, driving delivery routes himself when they were short-staffed, negotiating contracts at midnight with international suppliers because of time zone differences, sleeping 4 hours a night. But slowly, Ironclad Logistics gained a reputation: reliable, transparent, fast. Clients who had been burned by bigger, careless competitors started shifting their business to Marsh's small but sharp company. A turning point came when Sophia Bennett, a supply chain manager at a mid-sized manufacturing firm, gave Ironclad a trial contract after her company's shipments kept arriving late through their previous logistics partner. Marsh personally oversaw every shipment for her company for the first month, refusing to let a single delay happen. Sophia was impressed, not just by the service, but by Marsh's hands-on integrity. "You could easily hire someone to handle this and relax," she told him one afternoon. "Why do you still do it yourself?" "Because I built this company out of the ashes of someone else's mistake," Marsh said. "I promised myself I'd never let carelessness cost anyone what it cost me." He never told her the full story of Riya, not yet. But Sophia sensed there was a deeper wound behind his discipline, and she respected it enough not to push. Within 18 months, Ironclad Logistics expanded from a one-room office to 50 employees and 3 warehouses across the city. Marsh became known in local business circles as a young entrepreneur who had clawed his way from nothing, someone journalists loved profiling as a self-made underdog story. He gave interviews carefully, never mentioning Riya by name, only referring vaguely to a partnership that fell apart as motivation. Behind closed doors, though, Marsh often thought about her, not with longing, but with a strange, distant curiosity. Where was she now? Had her shell company succeeded with his stolen contracts, or had it collapsed the way she had once left him to collapse? He didn't chase the answer. He was too busy building. But fate, as it often does, was quietly assembling the pieces for a reunion neither of them was prepared for, one that would take place not in a courtroom, not on the street, but across a hiring desk in Marsh's own company. Riya Jannet's shell company hadn't lasted. The contracts she stole from Marsh gave her a temporary advantage, but without his operational knowledge, his relationships with suppliers, or his discipline, the business crumbled within a year. She had partnered with a smooth-talking investor named David Corwin, who promised her expansion and connections, but David turned out to be worse than she had ever been to Marsh. He drained the company's remaining funds and vanished to another city, leaving Riya not just broke, but in debt. For the past year, Riya had bounced between temporary jobs, each one lower than the last: a receptionist position she was let go from, a retail job that barely covered rent, a stint doing freelance admin work that dried up within months. She had watched, with a bitter mix of shame and disbelief, as Ironclad Logistics' name began appearing in local news, business podcasts, and LinkedIn success stories. She recognized the name behind it instantly: Marsh Luke. She told herself it was a coincidence at first, a common name, a different Marsh. But when she saw his photo in a local business magazine feature titled "From Rock Bottom to Rising Star," there was no denying it. The same jawline, the same quiet, serious eyes that used to look at her like she was the center of his world. Rent was due in 5 days. Riya had 400 rupees in her savings account and a stack of unanswered job applications, when a friend, working in HR, mentioned that Ironclad Logistics was hiring for an administrative coordinator position, decent pay, stable hours. Riya froze. "You okay?" her friend Mira asked. "It's a good company, growing fast." Riya hesitated for 3 full days before submitting the application. Pride wrestled with desperation, and desperation won. She told herself it was just a job like any other, that maybe Marsh wouldn't even be involved in hiring for an entry-level position, that companies this size had HR teams handling recruitment, not founders. She uploaded her resume with shaking hands, leaving out any personal history, focusing only on her admin and coordination experience. She used her middle name on the application, R. Jannet, instead of Riya Jannet, a small, cowardly attempt to stay unnoticed, just in case. The HR manager, Mrs. Whitfield, reviewed applications weekly with Marsh for any strategic hires, since the company still operated with a lean, hands-on leadership style despite its growth. Most administrative hiring didn't reach Marsh's desk directly, but this particular week, Mrs. Whitfield was short-staffed and asked Marsh to do a final review of the top 3 candidates himself. Marsh scrolled through resumes at his desk that evening, tired from a long day of client calls. The third resume loaded onto his screen. Solid coordination experience, decent references, a photo attached as per company policy. He stopped scrolling. The photo was blurry, a little older, a little more tired around the eyes, but there was no mistaking that face. The face that once told him, "I'll always be honest with you." The face on the message that read, "I needed a fresh start." Riya Jannet was applying for a job at his company. Marsh sat back in his chair, staring at the screen for a long, silent moment. 2 years of rebuilding, of discipline, of forcing himself not to think about her. And here she was, reaching out, without even knowing it, needing something only he could give her. He didn't feel anger in that moment. He felt something colder, sharper, clarity. He picked up his phone and called Mrs. Whitfield. "Schedule her interview," he said. "I'll conduct it personally." Riya arrived at Ironclad Logistics headquarters 15 minutes early, dressed in her only formal blazer, rehearsing answers to standard interview questions in her head. The building was sleek, modern, nothing like the small logistics offices she remembered from years ago when Marsh used to talk about his dreams over cheap dinners. She didn't let herself think about that. She needed this job. That was all that mattered. The receptionist led her to a glass-walled conference room on the 3rd floor. "The hiring manager will be with you shortly," the receptionist said, closing the door behind her. Riya sat, smoothing her blazer, glancing at her resume printout one more time. Footsteps approached. The door opened. Marsh Luke walked in, holding a folder, dressed in a sharp navy suit, every bit the confident founder the magazines had described. He looked up from the folder in his hands and their eyes met. The room went silent. Riya's breath caught in her throat. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Her mind scrambled for an explanation, an apology, anything, but nothing came out. "Marsh," she finally whispered. "Ms. Jannet." Marsh replied evenly, taking the seat across from her, his voice calm, professional, betraying nothing of the storm beneath the surface. "Please, sit. Let's begin the interview." "Marsh, Riya started, her composure cracking. "This is a professional interview for an administrative coordinator position," Marsh interrupted gently but firmly. "If you'd like to proceed, we can discuss your qualifications. If not, you're free to leave, and I understand completely." Riya swallowed hard, torn between humiliation and desperate need. She thought of her empty bank account, the eviction notice taped to her apartment door that morning, the debt collectors calling about David's failed loans that she was somehow still responsible for. She nodded. "I'd like to proceed." For the next 20 minutes, Marsh asked professional, standard interview questions. Her experience with scheduling systems, her communication skills, her ability to manage vendor relationships. Riya answered as best she could, her voice steadying gradually, though her hands trembled beneath the table. Near the end, Marsh set down his pen. "Can I ask you something outside the interview format?" Riya nodded silently. "Why did you apply here? Of all companies?" Riya's eyes welled up, but she refused to let the tears fall in front of him. "I didn't know if it was really your company at first. And when I realized it was, I told myself it didn't matter. I needed a job, Marsh. I have nothing left. David took everything, the same way I..." She stopped herself, unable to finish the sentence. "The same way you took everything from me," Marsh finished quietly. Silence stretched between them, heavy with 2 years of unspoken history. "I'm not going to pretend the past doesn't exist," Marsh said finally, "but this company isn't built on revenge, Riya. It's built on discipline and fairness. If you're qualified for this position, and if you can do the work with integrity, I won't let personal history disqualify you unfairly. But I also won't let it give you special treatment." Riya stared at him, stunned by the calm authority in his voice. Nothing like the heartbroken boy she had left behind. "I'll have HR follow up with a decision within the week," Marsh said, standing up and extending a professional handshake, exactly as he would with any other candidate. Riya shook his hand, her fingers trembling against his steady grip, unsure whether she had just witnessed forgiveness, judgment, or something far more complicated than either. The week Riya waited for Ironclad Logistics' decision felt longer than the 2 years since she'd left Marsh. She replayed the interview constantly, his composure, his fairness, the complete absence of the anger she had expected and almost wished for, because anger, at least, she could have understood. Mrs. Whitfield called her on a Thursday morning. "Ms. Jannet, we're pleased to offer you the administrative coordinator position starting next Monday." Riya sat frozen on her bed for several minutes after the call ended, relief and shame washing over her in equal measure. She had gotten the job, not through Marsh's mercy alone, she would later learn, but because her performance genuinely met the role's requirements, verified independently by Mrs. Whitfield's evaluation before Marsh even reviewed the final decision. Her first weeks at Ironclad Logistics were quiet, professional, and painfully humbling. She worked directly beneath a department head, rarely interacting with Marsh, who maintained strict, respectful distance, never favoring her, never punishing her, treating her exactly like any other employee. It was, in some ways, harder than if he had been cruel. His fairness left her no room for bitterness, no injustice to blame for her circumstances. Weeks turned into months. Riya worked hard, genuinely committed to rebuilding her own life, through honest effort rather than shortcuts. She coordinated vendor schedules efficiently, caught a costly shipping error before it escalated, and slowly earned quiet respect from her colleagues, who knew nothing of her history with the company's founder. One evening, working late to finish a vendor report, Riya found herself alone in the office with Marsh, who was reviewing quarterly numbers in his glass-walled office nearby. She hesitated, then knocked on his door. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. Marsh gestured for her to enter. "What's on your mind?" "I never got to say this properly," Riya said, her voice steady for the first time since she'd returned into his life. "I'm sorry, Marsh. Not because I got caught, or because I need this job. I'm sorry because what I did was wrong, and I let fear of struggling convince me that stealing your dreams was easier than building my own. Honestly, I was wrong." Marsh studied her for a long moment. "I appreciate you saying that," he said finally. "I'm not going to pretend I've forgotten what happened, but I've learned something these past 2 years. Holding on to anger doesn't rebuild anything. It just keeps you stuck in the moment you got hurt." "Do you forgive me?" Riya asked quietly. "I've let go of the anger," Marsh said carefully. "Forgiveness is still something I'm working through, but I respect that you're rebuilding through honest work now, instead of shortcuts. That matters." Riya nodded, tears finally falling, though not from despair this time, from something closer to release. 6 months later, Riya earned a promotion to team lead, entirely on merit, her work ethic finally speaking louder than her past mistakes. Marsh, meanwhile, continued expanding Ironclad Logistics into 2 new cities, his reputation as a fair, disciplined leader growing alongside his company's success. He never got the dramatic revenge some might have expected from his story. No public humiliation, no cruel power plays. Instead, he built something far more lasting, a life where his integrity became his greatest asset, and where the woman who once tried to destroy his future now stood, day after day, inside the very company built from the ashes she left behind, not as his victim and not as his enemy, but as living proof that Marsh Luke had truly rebuilt everything she thought she had taken from him forever. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't making someone suffer, it's becoming the person they could never destroy. Marsh didn't win because Riya lost. He won because he refused to lose himself. And in the end, the company built from betrayal became proof that integrity always outlasts deception. Some endings aren't about revenge, they're about becoming stronger than your past. Thank you for watching. If Marsh Luke's journey inspired you, remember this: success built with honesty can never be stolen. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, share it with someone who loves emotional stories, and subscribe for more unforgettable romance dramas every week. Until next time, keep believing that every ending can become a new beginning.